welcome to Monday at the Mound. My name is Anna. I'm a program specialist here, and I'm the manager of the garden. So we're going to talk all about the secret life of plants here today. So come on in to my oasis here at the Rock. All right, so we are in our history garden up at our farm site here at Rock Eagle. So if you have been here for EE on a field trip, maybe you have taken horticulture, Pioneer Life, or Pioneer Tools up here at this site. So this is our historic garden because we use pretty historic practices. So we try to replicate what a garden would have looked like in the mid-1800s when the settlers lived here. All right, so you won't see any big fancy irrigation systems. You won't see tractors or pesticides and herbicides because we don't use any of that here. We do have an irrigation system, but we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. All right, so today we are going to be talking about the plants that we have here in our garden and everything that you need to know to take care of plants and help them grow. All right, so we all know that plants need a few things. Sunlight being one of them. We have plenty of that today. It is a beautiful day here at the Rock. And in our garden, you'll notice there aren't trees immediately around the perimeter. So this allows for our plants to get the maximum amount of sunlight. But there can always be too much of a good thing. So in the morning, the sun comes up right back over there, past the wood, and the sun doesn't start to hit our garden until maybe like 11 or 11:30. So it does get plenty of shade so that our plants don't get overwhelmed and baked in the heat. So we have sunlight taken care of. We have our irrigation system that I mentioned, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. And then plants also need some good soil. So we'll talk about our soil as we go along. So y'all follow me. We're going to go to the end of our garden here. So our garden right now is kind of in a few different phases. So way back here towards the back of our garden, these are some of our plants that we planted in the late winter and really early spring. So you might notice that they are a little more developed right now. They have fruit. Some of them are kind of at the end of their life cycle. So we're gonna come on down over here to one of my personal favorite plants. In this row, at the very end, we have carrots. So you may say, I don't see any carrots. All I see are those green things. The carrot, the part that we eat, is actually underground here. And I can see the top of it poking out. And I'm gonna dig it out, but I don't want to pull the top off because it'll be hard to get out. So here you can see, oh, delicious. What a beautiful carrot. So this is what a carrot at the grocery store kind of looks like, right? And we know that this orange part is what we eat, but does anyone know what part of the plant we're eating itself when we eat a carrot? If you know or think you know, go ahead and leave your answer in the comments, all right? So we have our carrots down here. We have a lot of them. And the fun thing is that while this guy looks pretty similar to a grocery store carrot. He's a little smaller, but some of our carrots here are pretty big, but some of them look crazy. So maybe we'll come across some kind of funky looking carrots, some more fun ones farther down our row. So if you look just next to our row of carrots, you'll notice what looks like weeds. And weeds may be a good term for it, but I think that weeds are just plants whose purpose we don't immediately recognize. So a lot of this I've left here intentionally. So this is clover. You might recognize that as the 4-H symbol. Funny how that happens. And I left this clover here because it's actually really good for our garden. So it is what we call a cover crop, and this does exactly that. It is a blanket over our soil, and it helps keep the soil in place, and it doesn't wash away when it rains. But one of the really cool things that it does is it helps enrich our soil. So one of those things we talked about that plants need is good quality soil. Here in Georgia, we have some good soil, but we also have a lot of that red clay, which is really hard for plants to grow in. And so sometimes you have to let nature add some things to it. Maybe we add compost to it every now and then, help your soil out. So what our clover does for our soil, I pulled a few of the roots up for y'all to see, and you have to look really, really closely at the roots. You'll see these little white dots on it. Those are little nodules that help the clover with nitrogen fixation. So through a very complicated scientific process, the little tiny nodules that you can see on these roots help add nitrogen to our soil. And nitrogen is very important to all living things, and it is essential to the growth of our plants. The cool thing is that maybe you can't see these nodules on here through the camera because they are tiny, but if you have clover in your yard, you can also go out and pull up those roots, maybe help your parents with the weeding, and look at the roots and see the nodules. Oh, there's a lot. That's beautiful. Love it. Okay. So another thing about soil is that there are different types that you want. So you don't want your soil to be loosey-goosey, and if you pick it up in your hand, you can do what we call the squeeze test. So some soil, if you put it in your hand and then open it up, this is just gonna blow right out of my hands. That's okay. You know, this soil is obviously still helping us produce, but we don't want it to be super, super loose where the wind can just take it or the rain can just take it. But we like for our soil to have some moisture content, and you can do this nice squeeze test. So this is soil that's been irrigated. I do that squeeze test. Look how it stays nice and compact. But there's also another level after this where if you squeeze it real hard and it just doesn't break apart at all, then it's a little hard for your plant's roots to get down through. And so you really want a happy medium with your soil. So you don't want it to just blow away in the wind, but you don't want it to be so hard that it can't support your roots. So happy medium, that's what we try to keep it at here in our garden. So that's a little bit about our soil. So our garden has been here for several years. Lots of things have been planted in it. And one of the things I noticed recently this week while I was weeding is that some of those plants are making a comeback. So I believe these are little squash plants, and I found several of them growing among our onions. So I left these guys here to see what they do, see what they produce for us. So that's pretty neat because plants, if you have ever tried to grow plants before, you may know it's kind of difficult to get them to stay alive. You move them a little bit and they die. You forget to water them for one day and they die. But then sometimes there are some plants that they just come right back up. So some are very resilient, some are a little more difficult to take care of. That's just something you learn as you deal with plants more. So as we make our way down these rows, you'll start to see these really tall plants with these white balls at the top. This is actually onion. So we have several down here, and one of the really cool things is that at the top of this onion plant, you can see the flowers. So these have kind of started to bloom, but we don't eat the flower of onion plants, or at least I don't. Maybe someone does, but I don't. What we actually are eating is what you see right here, this bulb-like part of the onion. So you actually have to pull the entire plant out of the ground, similar to like we did with our carrot, and then this is the part we eat. Some types of onions you can chop up the stem as well, and that is pretty good. But for the most part, the onions we're used to seeing at the grocery store look like this, and you can even see the layers of its skin kind of flaking off right there. So one other thing that is really cool about our carrots, like I said, some of them look very normal. And then some of them look like this guy. So this carrot decided to grow at its own pace. He did his own thing. So it's really fun if you do grow your own food, have your own garden, to see what kind of unique produce you come up with. I just think that's really cool. So we're gonna leave that guy there for right now. I'll come back for him. One other really neat thing at the end of this row is that I found today a sunflower plant just making its way up here. I didn't plant anything down here. So that is another example of how some plants, they are very resilient and they just make their way up through the dirt. All right, so let's keep moving. Right over here, you'll notice rows in between our other produce that don't have anything growing. You're like, that's all weeds again. This is actually a couple of rows that don't have anything there. We're leaving them fallow. So fallow, it means that we are just letting the soil rest. We're letting other plants grow there and letting nutrients return to that soil. Because if you just keep growing and using the same soil, eventually those plants are gonna absorb all those nutrients every time you plant a new round of crops, and your soil is not gonna have time to replenish itself. So this is something we're doing just to give our soil a bit of a break. So I think this is my favorite row. This is where we have our strawberries. So you may see a few of our beautiful strawberries peeking out from under their leaves. We have several growing here. So strawberries are another very common food, especially for summer, but common to see in the grocery store. If you know or want to guess what part of the strawberry plant are we eating when we eat a strawberry, leave it in the comments and we'll see. This is a really good plant because you can see all its different parts. We have our leaves, we have the stems, we have the strawberry itself, we have flowers. This one has beautiful pink flowers. Oh my gosh, a lizard just ran out of that plant. You never know what you're gonna find in this garden. I found toads, snails, little songbirds will hang out in here sometimes and drink the water. It's pretty fun here in the garden. So I've collected a few strawberries here. These are gorgeous. I'm excited about these. So this is where we have our strawberries. Whoops. One thing you may notice is that we have a lot of straw around them. That is for us to suppress weeds. We want our strawberries to enjoy this space and we don't want them to be overtaken by a bunch of weeds because we can't get these beautiful fruits out of those weeds. So right over here, if you just turn a little bit, you'll see that we have collard greens growing. And you may say, those things look pitiful. They don't have any leaves on them. That's because these guys are kind of at the end of their growing cycle. They are still here because I'm gonna try to collect their seeds from here. So this is where the little seed pod, it's produced these seeds. I wanna try to collect these and see what I can do with them, if I can plant them again for next year. But with our collard greens, the part that you're eating comes right off of the stalk. These are definitely a little past their season, so they aren't quite as beautiful as the ones you would want to eat. I'm gonna leave those guys right there. Okay. So over to some of the newer stuff. We have a few rows that were recently planted. So right here you can see some corn coming up, and down there we have some peas that are coming up. And then in this row, I just planted it last week. We had some forage. But what I want to show you here is our irrigation system. So this is what we call drip tape. It is connected to a long hose that runs along the back of the garden. That long hose is connected to our water spigot. It's on a timer, and I can turn it on and off or set it to come on and off at specific times. This is a really cool system because it's very efficient. and it does not waste a lot of water. The water is directed to these small openings. And you may think that that's not going to get the plant very much water, but the way that it gives the plant water is very smart. So what I do is I put the drip tape down first, and where I see that the water is coming out, that's where I plant the seed. That means that the water is going to drip only within the area where the seed is, rather than putting water all over the place, getting water in the weeds, letting it run off through the dirt. It is pinpointed in one place. That helps to minimize how much water we use and to control how much water we use. It's a really neat system. So you can see it has done pretty well for this corn. These guys are coming up nicely. Excited about that. All right, as we move along, we'll step over these rows. So I'm just gonna walk right over this because these are more rows that we have left fallow. So they are just hanging out for now. Hopefully later in the season, I will get them nice and weeded and plant some more stuff. We have more onions. They are not quite as tall as our other ones at the other end of the garden, but they are doing just fine. We love them just the same. And then if we make our way down this row, you will see some leaves, and within those leaves, you will see a familiar plant. Yes, this is broccoli. So, this is not how broccoli comes in the store. We are used to seeing really just this part, maybe a bigger crown of broccoli. Who can tell me in the comments, if you know or want to take a guess, does anyone know what part of the broccoli are we eating? So we know, I'm not clipping off the leaves. You know, we might eat some of the stem, but what is this? That looks different. All right, so we want to know what part of that broccoli we are eating. I'm clipping a little of this because this broccoli is ready to be harvested. They are so ready to fulfill their duty as my snack this afternoon. All right, so we've got some good stuff here. I'm excited about this. So as we make our way over our rows, you will see we have some okra. This okra, I planted it from seed back in March, I believe. And we raised it inside, and once it was big enough to support itself, we brought it out. But the okra has not done super hot. It's growing, but I'm kind of wondering about it. And I think that maybe part of the reason it's not growing as fast as I expected is because the seeds that we have, I think are from a collection that we've had for a while. I don't know that they have as good of a germination rate. So just something we're gonna see what happens. Down here, we have some of my favorites. We have several sunflowers growing. So you can see the tall, leafy plants all the way down here are our sunflowers. They have not yet bloomed, but they definitely will. They love the warmer weather, and I believe in the summer that they are gonna be looking beautiful. So just past the sunflowers, we have peas growing. So these guys love to grow up something else. So you may see them growing up a fence post or some kind of trellis. So what I did, since we don't have rows right next to our fence posts, and I don't have any anything to make a trellis with right now, I actually planted corn in between our beans, our peas rather, so that the peas can trail up the corn as those corn stalks grow. So we'll see. I just planted that corn. We'll see how it comes up, what it decides to do. And then we have even more corn. So these guys I planted a little bit longer ago, and they are doing wonderful. So you can see the leaves, that form the stalk of our corn. And then later, as it becomes summer, these guys are gonna grow so tall and produce those ears of corn that we are used to seeing. So I'm really excited to see how these guys grow. That's a cool leaf, it's like a corkscrew. And what they produce. So I think it's really cool. All of our plants look so unique and they're really fascinating. So our last row that we have over here is cucumbers. So these guys, they're doing pretty well. So the first leaves, when our cucumbers first sprouted, the leaves were these kind of oval shaped ones. But that's just what the juvenile plant looks like. Once they get bigger and start to grow, their leaves are sort of like a polygon shape, and they're a little prickly on the sides, and they have hairy stems. Eventually, with enough water and sun and love, these guys will start to produce cucumbers. So we have a lot of good stuff going on in our garden. So my favorite thing about gardens is that you can grow flowers, you can grow produce, and anything that you get out of them is something that is a result of your hard work. If you want to cut the flowers for your table, if you want the produce to be your afternoon snack, which is what these guys will be for me, gardening is super, super fun and can be a really cool experiment. So maybe you try different seeds. You can try putting plants in different light areas, areas that get different amounts of sun, all kinds of stuff. And you can always learn something while you're out in the garden. That is why I love being out here in our garden so much. It is a wonderful time. I do spend a lot of time weeding up here, and every now and then I'll feed the weeds to our goats over there. I'm sure they would enjoy trying some of the broccoli. Let's see what they decide to do with this broccoli. Want a snack? Oh, he loved it. He loved it. All right. Oh, okay. Yes, I'll give you some. There you go. All right, you guys, be sure to leave any questions or comments that you have in the comments section of the video. And I hope that you've enjoyed this Monday at the Mound. Tune in tomorrow for Tuesdays on Tidy, and y'all have a great afternoon.